If you would, please. Thank you. All right, I would like to go ahead and call this April 11th, 2024 Municipal Planning Commission meeting to order. Excused from the meeting, we're missing a couple today, so could I have a motion to excuse Greg and Dan, please? Holly. Holly makes a motion to excuse those folks from our meeting today. All in favor of Holly's motion? That is carried. We have our minutes of our last meeting, March the 28th, in the package. Are there any errors or omissions to those minutes? Seeing none, how would you, Adina, please?
I'll make a motion to approve those minutes.
Thank you. Any further comments? All in favor of Adina's motion? That is carried. Anything to add to the agenda? Staff? No? Okay, a motion to approve the agenda, please. Amanda. Amanda moves approval of the agenda as presented. All in favor of Amanda's motion? That is carried. Development permit, item 6. Sorry, development report, item 6. Are there any questions about the report in our package? Shannalee, anything you want to highlight?
The Eastern Irrigation District accessory building was an office, or is an office, at the Rolling Hills Reservoir Campground. And the agricultural building on the Lutz parcel, he got a development permit for that because it was under the 40 acres.
My mic is on. Okay. I am remiss. We do have guests in the gallery. So I am remiss for not doing introductions. Let's start over with Lynette this morning, and we'll go all the way around the room.
Good morning, I'm Lynette Kopp, Division 3, the Patricia Millicent area.
Good morning, Adina Scandrip, Division 2, the area around the hamlet of Tilly.
Good morning, Holly Johnson, Division 4, Scandia, Rainier, and Bow City.
Welcome, Matt Fensky, Chief Administrative Officer.
Good morning, Arno Dirksen, Division 9, the GEM area.
And I am Kelly Chrisman, Division 6, the west side of the county.
Good morning, Ellen Unruh, and I represent the area around the village of Rosemary.
Good morning, Amanda Philpott, Division 8, Duchess.
Neil Johnson, Division 10.
We'll go to the back of the room. Catherine?
Catherine Siakla, Communications Officer.
Cheryl Page, Planning and Development Administrative Assistant.
Hi, Sandra from the Bulletin.
Shannalee, Development Officer.
Hello, I'm Maria Jackson, Supervisor of Planning and Development.
I'm Mike Krupp from Tilly, Alberta.
Morning, Andrew Chrisman.
Thank you.
And I'm Jeff Tiffin with the county.
Great, thank you everybody, and welcome to our MPC meeting this morning. Going back to Shannalee's report, are there any questions further to comments? Seeing none, we'll accept that for information. Thank you, Shannalee. 7.1. Who would like to take us through? Shannalee, thank you.
Thank you. Development permit 2024016 is for the construction of a detached garage in the Shuet subdivision. The applicant is a vehicle collector and expects to use the building for storage of these vehicles. The land use bylaw states that an accessory building on a parcel under 0.8 hectares cannot exceed 5 meters in height. The applicant is requesting a variance of 1 meter, allowing the detached garage to be constructed 6 meters in height. The applicant's letter is in your package. Specifically, he would like to add a truck storage lift in the building and a mezzanine for storage. There was no issues with the IDP, there was no response from adjacent landowners, and there was no issues or concerns from staff. We would recommend approval, and Mr. Chrisman is here to answer questions.
Good, thank you, Shanna-Lee. Come on forward. Andrew, if I may. Andrew and I just got acquainted. We are cousins, and we have never met. So it's a family reunion. Yeah, nice to meet you this morning, Andrew. MPC, do we have any questions of the applicant regarding this application? Holly has a question.
I'm just looking at the maps. You're going to have a new approach to this garage? And is that an issue at all with other roads there, driveways?
Shanna-Lee.
There is an approach there. It's not a new approach, and it has been reviewed by our Municipal Services Department and is to standard.
Thank you for that. Seeing no other questions. Gee, we're letting you off easy, eh, Andrew? Oh, you have another one. Don't be shy. Go ahead.
So this building is slightly over height. So is in your areas or other over height buildings? Well, this one, is it typical of the area?
Yeah, the neighbor has one down the road, but almost everyone else is detached garages in that stretch. But I don't think it's going to look funny at all being as far off the road as it is.
Back to MPC. Go ahead, Neil.
Just to keep it in the family, Kelly, I'll move this motion.
Thank you. Any further comments? Concerns? All in favor of Neil's motion? That is carried. I guess you're building, Andrew. Thanks for coming in and answering. We never know what questions are going to come forward, right? So thanks for your time this morning. Item 7.2. Shanna-Lee, again, thank you.
Thank you. Development permit 2024021 is for the installation of a manufactured dwelling that has an addition and an accessory building that is existing in the hamlet of Rolling Hills. The previous dwelling on the parcel was also a manufactured home, and it was destroyed by fire. The proposed manufactured dwelling is in 1984, and there's photos included in your package. We're recommending the standard security deposit of $5,000 with manufactured homes. There was no issues or concerns from staff. There was no response from adjacent landowners. We're recommending approval, and Mr. Croft is here to answer questions.
Good morning. Welcome to MPC. So you would like to move back to your property? I just get you to use the microphone. Yeah.
Well, I'm actually just purchasing the property.
Okay, great. MPC, do you have questions for Mr. Kropp? Ellen, please.
Since it's 1984, in what sort of shape is the manufactured home that you purchased?
I would say it's in excellent shape. We've done a lot of work to it over the years. The addition would only be about 6 years old. At that time, we put a brand new metal roof on it. And 3 years prior to that, we put new siding on it. And there's been, all the north windows have been changed out. Yeah, it's in good shape.
Thank you for that. And there are photos of the visual. Okay. So Is this located somewhere else within the county
Yes,
presently?
it's just north of the town of Tilly, just as the S-curve straighten out, it's the first farm on your right.
Okay, thank you. Lynette?
So in the picture, there's a deck on there, but on that picture, it shows like there's 2 decks. So is all the decking coming with you, or are you building new?
No, they're all there. The one would be on the back side of the house, which I don't think a picture was taken from the back side of the house. I think both of those pictures, if I'm right, are from the road. So they'd be just taken from the, oh, I'm not sure which direction that is, but the west, I guess it would have been.
We do have both sides of the mobile, and there is no deck on the one side. I see why Lynette would ask that, but so maybe this is an older photo?
No, it was recent. They just never took it from the other direction.
Okay.
They just took a shot from the, would be the northwest and also the southwest. And they never took it from the other direction, which would be the east, northeast.
But the application will cover both decks,
Yes.
correct? Yes. Okay. Adina?
I think for just clarification purposes, this photo we're looking at right now is before the fire. So there was a fire here. And so this, what is there now isn't, like what you're looking at isn't what's actually there right now. So the pictures of the manufactured home in Tilly is going to be moved to this place. So, yeah, what's there, what you see isn't what's actually there.
Thank you. Any other questions? Ellen?
If we're ready, I'd like to make a motion to approve the development permit with conditions.
Thank you, Ellen. Any further questions, comments, concerns? All in favor of Ellen's motion? That is carried. You're on the move.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for coming in and answering our questions this morning. Much appreciated. We had no other business. We had no post agenda. Is there a reason for in camera this morning? Seeing none. Question period. Any questions in the queue, Catherine? Any questions from anybody here in the room? Seeing none, I'll adjourn this meeting.
5? Let's I guess there's some technical difficulties, but they will probably be resolved as we move along. Good morning, everyone. We have two vacancies at council. Dan Short and Greg Screever are not here. We need a motion to excuse them. Ellen, all in favor, please indicate. That's carried. Thank you. We also have the minutes of the March 28th meeting been circulated. Are there any errors or omissions, or if not, a motion to approve? Holly?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you. All in favor of that motion, please indicate. That's carried. Thank you. Now, are there any additions to the agenda? Any post-agenda items? We do have 5 scheduled delegations, one at 10:45, at 11, at 11:30, at 1 and 1:30 p.m., which we will take. Anything else to add to the agenda or a motion to approve the agenda as circulated? Kelly?
I move to approve the agenda as circulated.
Thank you. All in favor, please indicate. That's carried. Thank you. Question period or notices of motion. Are there any questions online? Anyone have a notice of motion or anything like that? If not, we'll move ahead. Our first public hearing is in 15 minutes, so let's move to item 8, right. Sorry. Bylaws. 8.1. Pardon me?
Sorry,
10.1. Yeah, I think we're, yeah. Okay, 10.1 is a request to refund an application fee from Rolling Hills. Shanley, you've got that, please. Go ahead, sorry.
Thank you. The request is for development permit 2024017, which is for an intensification of use of the Rolling Hills School, which has not been brought before the Municipal Planning Commission yet. In reviewing historical requests for refunds, there was a refund request for the EID Historical Park in 2022, which was denied. The Tilly School applied and paid for a permit for their school in 2019, and the Scandia Hall, another public use facility, applied and paid for a permit in 2022. I've provided 2 options. Option 1 would be that the county waive the fee for the development permit. Option 2, that the County of Newell refuse the request to waive the fee. We're recommending option 2 to refuse the request because of the history of the requests.
Thank you, Shanley. Matt, you've got a further comment?
Yeah, I appreciate the recommendation here from staff. I would support refusing the request to waive. You know, that presentation from that group of kids was really great. I think that project down there aligns with council's priority for promoting ag education. And if I might, I would offer maybe a third option for council to consider. And it would be that you approve the additional spending of the $600 through the Ag Services Grant and Donation account to cover the cost of the fee. So we don't set precedent by waiving the fee. The county taxpayers at large would cover the cost in support of ag education in Rolling Hills.
Okay, thank you. That's an option. Appreciate that, Matt. Lynette, go ahead, please.
In part of this, they talked about some of the development permit being something that wasn't permitted before, like when something was built in 1956. Where does Grasslands School come into all of that?
Okay, who can answer that? Maria, please.
I'll try. So there are developments on this property that have happened prior to the land use bylaw, but also when there was a land use bylaw and development permits weren't applied for. Grasslands is responsible for obtaining permits, much like anyone else in any other public facility.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Kelly, please.
I was thinking that I'm ready for the option 3. was leaning towards option 2 big time, but now that we have some money made available in the Ag Services Department under advertising and promotion, I would like to make a motion that we take option 3.
Which is not to waive the fee, but to contribute back to the
Exactly.
organization. Thank you. Okay. Any further discussion? Ready for the question? Holly, pardon me. Go ahead.
When I'm reading the letter, there it says a development permit is 600 and a building permit for the Secan greenhouse and pump shed were 364. Are they actually requesting $964?
I think as, well, who's can answer that? I think the RFD talks about 600. Oh, Shannon, go ahead, please.
The RFD is for the 600. The shipping container they have asked to have included on the development permit that is going to come to MPC in May. However, they're not certain they're going to be getting the shipping container. So they wouldn't be asking to be refunded for that when they're not sure that they're going to bring it in.
Okay, thank you. Adina, please.
Did we have something to do with that shipping container?
Question, Matt, you can answer that.
Yeah, so that additional spending was approved earlier in the year, and my understanding is the shipping container has been ordered, and if it has not been delivered, it should be shortly.
Okay. Further clarification?
Yeah.
Kelly, go ahead.
Yeah, just to clear things up, my motion is for the $600 as presented in the RFD. Okay?
That's clear, thank you. Ready for the question? All in favor of the motion, please indicate. That's carried, thank you. Okay, thank you. Item number 10.2, survey for the municipal affairs engagement on municipal collaboration frameworks. Matt, are you going to take us through that, please?
Yes, I will do my best here. This survey is due tomorrow. I circulated what I found to be a very helpful ICF member guide from RMA. That informed a lot of what I will suggest to council as our responses here. And I'm just going to go through these one by one, except I'm going to skip the first 4 questions about who we are and did we have arbitration or mediation, which we did not have. So if we pick things up at question 5 under intermunicipal services, question 5, based on your experience, the legislation should be amended to, and of the options there, I think it's important to keep in mind the resolutions that RMA has currently, one of, I think, the most important of which is that the legislation actually provide a definition for core municipal services. So here, my recommendation would be either box 2, which says reinsert the list of specific services with the ability for municipalities to add other services delivered directly by the municipality, or if council has another idea that they'd like to put in there, we'd go with other.
Okay, any responses? Suggested number 2, are we good with that? It looks like we are by consensus. Go ahead, yeah.
Question 6, referring to A and E above, if a list were reintroduced to the legislation, are there other services that should be added to the list as mandatory? I'm seeing some shaking heads. No, that's where I would go with it as well. So if we're comfortable with no on that one. Question 7, referring to A and E above, if a list were reintroduced to the legislation, are there services that should be removed from the list as mandatory? And I think if you consider the intent of ICFs, it's really targeted towards intermunicipal efficiencies, right? So if, let's take transportation, for instance. The county runs a minibus, the city runs a minibus. Are there opportunities to collaborate in that space and improve efficiencies? Well, yeah, let's talk about that. So transportation being in there as mandatory, that might make some sense to get municipalities together and talking about those services, considering them. Anything you would like to see removed from that list? I'm seeing shaking heads. No for 7. Moving on to 8.
Question.
Just question around things that are maybe missing, or not missing, but not on this list, or maybe they fall in these categories. I want to hear about libraries, airports, social services. Because those topics are not on this list. So we are, for the most part, doing social services. We are, for the most part, doing libraries, not mandated. But they are, and maybe there's other topics that are falling through the cracks. Can you help me with those?
Yeah, so I guess the question here is, and I think in this region, all municipalities have been very proactive at working together on solid waste, on water, with FCSS, keep going down the list, even fire services. For the airport, I would suggest the airport falls under the transportation heading, similar to transit, as well as roads. The question here would be, do you want to be forced by the province to have these conversations about social services and libraries, or do you want to leave that to municipalities to decide, you know, if we agree to work together on the social services, we will do so, but we don't want the province forcing us into that conversation.
Okay, I think I see agreement on
Yeah.
perspective on
And
that.
then
That's good.
another topic, you mentioned fire and housing. So those are big expenditures that we are working together. But I just wanted to throw them out there so that we broaden our thinking when we are going through this process.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. Holly, you've got a question, comment?
Yeah, Kelly, but you're not saying you want them included though, right? Because I think the mandated part is the problem. If you look at some of the conflicts that have ensued, it's because of one side pushing a service the other may not want to support at the same level. So mandated can make it more difficult for the discussions.
Yeah, you're reading me right, Holly. I'm not suggesting it. I'm just pointing out that there are these other services that are going on, and maybe this list is extensive. Maybe we don't want transportation. Maybe we don't want emergencies. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there that there are a lot of other services that are working for us that maybe we don't want to be mandated on. I'm just tossing the thought out there.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, go ahead.
Moving on, question 8. So we're on to ICF agreement duration. So the term and review of ICFs. Previously, it was in the legislation at 5 years. There's currently a ministerial order that pushes that out to 7. RMA's position here is the second bullet point, that you require review at least every 7 years. 7 years sounds like a long time until you've been in the trenches with these things. Like we're coming up, if the 5th year was still in place, we'd be reviewing all of our ICFs right now. And it is not an insignificant task for rural municipalities who have to play with every neighbor that they border to get through that. So I would suggest here we align with RMA's position and go with at least every 7 years.
Okay.
Seeing nodding heads. Moving on, number 9, cost calculations. This is where the rubber hits the road. And RMA's position has always been that ICF agreements should not just be an exercise that seeks to share revenues. You know, rurals giving part of their tax base to urbans, you should have actual costs and actual data that support the usage of the various services by rural residents that support the cost calculations here. So if we look at question 9, based on your experience, the legislation should require costs associated with shared services in an ICF to be determined based on, and select all that apply. Equalized assessments? No. Usage by each municipality? Well, that's kind of reasonable. Population? I'd say no. Mutual agreement by municipality? That's better, but open for a lot of conflict. Independent assessment, or none of the above. The legislation should not specify how costs are allocated. That is RMA's position, and I would suggest maybe we check off the other and say, make a clear statement that it should not be based on equalized assessment or population, and the legislation should include a legislated standard for the quality of data that municipalities use as proof of their current service delivery costs and service level requirements. So we need to see some proof in the pudding. This was a position the county took in our ICF negotiations, is we were happy to provide funding support, but we asked for the data. So how many of our users are going through the rec facilities? What have you? What are the call volumes on fire response? In some cases, that data is easy to track and surface, and in other areas like recreation, there is still work to be done. So my suggestion would be we check off the other box and include those items unless there's other feedback from council to consider there.
I like that. Neil, you've got a question?
Yeah, the one I like best in the whole thing, just run by why it's no good again, is the cost per capita. That's the only thing that just divides out totally fair. Maybe not. Tell me why.
Yeah, so cost per capita will benefit your urbans and disadvantage your rurals. There are a number of services that are easily accessed by folks in an urban environment that folks who live, I'll take Patricia for example, or up in Gem. Those folks have to drive 45 minutes to use the swimming pool in Brooks. It costs them more to access the service. So I don't think per capita is the right standard either.
Okay, yeah, moving on. I think general agreement with the direction you're suggesting.
All right, question 10, mediation and arbitration. And if you read through the RMA guide, they kicked out a survey, and 25% of survey respondents said in their ICF agreements, they agreed to things that they weren't entirely comfortable with just to avoid the pain and cost of arbitration and mediation. So this is an area where RMA is suggesting and is lobbying for a number of changes around who the arbitrators are, what training they have, what authority they have to impose certain terms of an agreement. Question 10, please rate your municipality's experience with the mediation process, not applicable. Number 11, in your opinion, under the legislation, if municipalities are unable to reach an agreement by a set timeline, should they be required to enter into mediation, go directly to arbitration, which is the status quo, or other? And here I would suggest we reinforce RMA's positions regarding the ICF arbitration process. They have a number of points in their guide, and I would reiterate those here. Moving on. Question 12, in your opinion, the division of costs associated with mediation and arbitration should be based on, select all that apply. Equalized assessment, that means rurals will pick up the tab. A standard metric, i.e. total revenue, or equal division among all parties. I would go with equal division, split 50-50. This can turn into a game, right, for folks who aren't getting along. Luckily, we get along with the municipalities in our region, but we've all heard the stories at RMA for those who haven't. I thought in the back of my mind, you know, if you initiate it, maybe you should pay a larger share of the costs, right? So I'm not sure. RMA suggests that you put a cap on the amount that any one party can pay at 90%, which I thought, man, that's kind of a high threshold. But I like the idea of a cap so that, you know, there might be some really small villages out there that just don't have the capacity to pay, and I don't have the insight into all the conflicts that can happen out there, but I would go with either equal division or some form of that cap suggested by RMA.
Neil, go ahead.
What about, I'm not against any of this. It's just, our experience with Duchess, I still can't get over because we dumped all those thousands of dollars for nothing. What about loser pays? Same as if you sue me and you win, I pay. Like put some penalty in there for just running to the lawyers instead of, oh, it's 90% here, it's equalization payments there. Nobody worries about who's going to pay all these guys. So that's not in there, but is there a way of, or maybe is it worth the discussion? I think it really should be just to stop people from using the service, make them try and figure things out for themselves. If they do choose, let them know that it might cost them a little money.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Holly?
Although I like that idea, what I have read is that statistically the urban municipalities tend to win much more than the rural ones do. And the claim has been that the arbitrators favor urban municipalities. I don't know if that's true because we haven't been involved in it, but I'd hate to see the rural municipalities get an extra cost when maybe it's not the fairest judgment. I mean, in a real world, that's an excellent idea. I don't know if it's a real world situation.
Well, maybe it isn't, and that's the problem of the government for supplying their arbitrators, that they're giving us people that aren't neutral. It's just, I really do not like the idea of municipalities paying with taxpayers' money to solve problems that we're supposed to all be able to solve.
Yeah, good. Kelly, please.
I think the safest way to answer this question is equal amongst all parties, because that way it takes two to play. So why not have two pay? If we take a penalty side of things, how do you word that? How does that penalty work out? Is it a percentage? Like,
the way it's worded in a real court, and I paid, is you lose, you pay. Court costs are yours.
so we go back to Holly's point of saying that statistically, so middle of the road here is equal division in answer to this question, to be on the safe side of things, in my opinion.
I think that's probably, could be, be the case. I think there's almost another aspect we're concerned about here, and that is getting drug into something, which I think we felt was the case that really could be solved by a few people sitting around a table and talking things out reasonably. And I think that's part of the concern on this, is that you get drug into something that you have to pay for. So maybe there's another opportunity for a comment around that. Does that make sense? Matt, you're probably more familiar with the whole process here, but I would almost favor that the equal payment be the case, but maybe there's some other penalty if you get drug in unnecessarily.
Yeah, so I'll go with other, suggest equal division, but consider penalties for folks who are pulling you in frivolously, something along those lines.
Yes, or some sort of a format that discourages frivolous claims.
I got that. Question 13, in your opinion, for municipalities going through the arbitration process, the legislation should stipulate that, and I won't read all of these in interest of time. I've got the second box checked off here. The municipalities write the framework based on the arbitrator's decision and are required to adopt it. Question 14, we're on to enforcement. So we're talking about ministerial powers here. In your opinion, in the event a municipality chooses to ignore an arbitrated decision, the minister should have the authority to select all that apply. RMA has taken no position on the scope and process of the minister's enforcement powers. If I'm looking at this, I would probably go with the third option, allow the municipalities to pursue this in a court of action, which is status quo, or in other, if the minister has the ability to override or dismiss an arbitrator decision, there should be some consideration for how the minister must justify that action. Question 15, in your opinion, in cases where arbitrated decisions are determined to have an unfair impact or go beyond the legislated provisions of an ICF, the minister should, I've got the third checked off here as well, have the authority to amend or remove elements of the arbitrator's decision. And I think we've heard from our peers that there were many arbitrator decisions that, put a rural municipality on the hook for childcare service that they had no input into the governance or decision to provide that service by the urban municipality. Or in other, the minister should be able to override an arbitrator's decision if they view it as having an unfair impact or it overreaches the legislated provisions of the ICFs. This power should be implemented with changes to the arbitration process. So if we go with the other checkbox, yes, the minister should have authority to amend or remove, but also add, you need to give some serious thought to how you've structured and trained arbitrators and the arbitration process. So I would lean towards that other. And lastly, here, conclusion, do you have anything else you would like to share about ICFs? And this is where I'll look around the table for your answers. RMA gave some great suggestions in their guide on page 12. Back to usage data, like the data has to support the funding decisions. An ICF agreement should not just look at your rural neighbor as your bank account. And there should probably be some proportionate give and take on, if you're looking for 50% of the funding for a thing, we should have 50% of the governance and decision-making involvement. So it's not okay to show up with a $3 million project asking for 50% if this council has not been involved in deciding about that project for the community. What else do I have here? It's problematic to expect contributions without any consideration of corresponding input into service level determination. Anything else to add in that free-for-all?
Thanks, Matt. Kelly and then Neil.
The first thing that came to my mind is to point out that historically the County of Newell has done an excellent job of sharing finances. In fact, we were early to that table, or early to that game. Somehow enhance that wording that we have been here doing that, and now being mandated has put a different light on the activity.
Okay, thank you.
Bit of a strain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Neil? Thank you, Kelly.
Yeah, I agree with the way Matt worded it there, every line, and I think we should put a big star beside usage, because that's the data that we don't even have that much of around here. If you want to justify ICFs and things that are going on, usage is huge. The rest of them are all important too, but that's my number one.
I think further to what, that's good, what Kelly raised and what you had there, Matt, is that, I mean, wherever possible, we need to push for common sense solutions that are determined regionally rather than mandated and legislated impracticalities, I'm going to say. Okay, we're good? Okay, we're running a little bit late, but we will move to at 11 or 10:45, we have a rec facility funding from Castles. Gary Hawkins is here. Do you want to come to the table, please? And we'll have quick introductions here. Neil, you want to start, please?
I'm Neil Johnson, Division 10 rep.
Good morning, Amanda Philpott, Division 8, Duchess.
Good morning, Ellen Unruh, and I represent the area around the village of Rosemary.
Good morning, it's nice to meet you. I'm Kelly Chrisman from the west side of the county.
Morning, Gary. Arno Dirksen, Division 9, Gem area.
Welcome, Matt Fensky, Chief Administrative Officer.
Morning, Gary. Holly Johnson, Scandia, Rainier, and Bow City, Div 4.
Morning, Gary. Adina Scandrip, Division 2, the area around the hamlet of Tilly.
Good morning, I'm Lynette Kopp from Division 3, Patricia Millicent area.
Catherine Siakla, Communications Officer.
Ariana Nielsen, Executive Assistant.
Sandra Stanway, Brooks Bulletin.
Gary, welcome.
Good morning. Thanks for inviting me in. I don't know what else I can add other than, we're hoping to get this garage going so that we can try to get all of our lawn equipment and things inside so that we don't have kids playing with them or destroying them. As it is right now, in the wintertime, the mower sits outside, the lawn sweep sits outside. In the summertime, the gravel sweep that's on the tractor sits outside. Yeah, it's just not very, very good accommodations for it.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Matt, do you want to just take us through yeah, please.
Yeah, so I know Lane had been in contact with Gary here, talked through the application process. I know it had come in a little bit earlier and there was a little bit of back and forth there on getting the package together. Lane is suggesting council could consider whether this project fits into Category 3 as a minor project intended to reduce the annual operating contribution required. So I think the question there is, does the $50,000 investment today provide a return on investment of at least that $50,000 being saved in operating costs over the life of the facility? In my mind, I'm looking at this, and from the details in the application, it looks like the old building's going to be moved and you've got a new build. So I would lean towards this fitting into that new build category, which would have county funding at 25% and the local community at 75%. But that would be for council to debate and struggle with.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Are there questions for Gary? Kelly, please.
First off, I wanted to thank you for the work that you do out in Castle's community and taking care of that wonderful facility that benefits all of the region. My struggle here, or my thinking here, is that this is obviously a new build, that it fits in as a new build, and I can see the reason for you wanting this. I did want to thank you for all that you do for our community, though. That was my biggest reason for grabbing the mic.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Holly, go ahead, please.
I was just curious, Gary, how you found the application form to fill out. Was it clear? Like you put as an emergency bill. Did you find the definitions good to help you? Was it an easy process for you to decide how to apply for this?
Actually, it's went back and forth since before COVID. When we had our first meeting out at Castles and they were trying to decide what to do, and then COVID hit, so then for 2 years or 3 years there was nothing. And then Lane has been keeping me in touch with different things that have been coming up. So.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Neil, please.
I'm just wondering if the 75-25 split is okay with you.
Well, we'd really like to see the 70% that, you know, that Lane has suggested. Overall, over 3 or 4 years, you know, it's going to save a lot on our equipment, our irrigation pipe, our extra pipe, which will now be able to go in the building. In the past, I've had to go out and pick it up because kids have been out there playing with it, broke it into pieces and such. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Are there any other questions? Ollie, go ahead, please.
I think it was about 6 months or a year ago, there was an application from Castles about paving a parking lot. Is that something you're going to be looking at in the future besides this one, or is that no longer in the queue?
Excuse me. No, we're not looking at paving the parking lot at all. We've done some more testing out there, and with the weight of some of the campers, the trucks, we're just afraid that the pavement will just get all rutted. With gravel, we can at least keep it, the ruts full.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Seeing no other questions, we have a decision to make, but we're also on a tight schedule this morning and running a little bit behind, so I'm going to suggest that we'll consider the question a little later in the day. But is there anything else you'd like to present to us this morning before we move on?
Not really. I just want to thank you for allowing me to come in and express my opinions.
Well, we very much appreciate that too, Gary. Thanks for coming in, and I reiterate the appreciation for what you do in the Castles area, but it serves a larger area and certainly the city of Brooks as well. So thank you for your work on all of our behalf. Thanks, Gary. Okay, we have an appointment with our auditor at 11 o'clock. I'm going to suggest we take 5 minutes and then come back at 10 after 11, and we'll move right into our financial review.
It wasn't really on topic, but I thought it should be. But it's kind of relevant. Exactly. I'm actually yeah. Well, I thought I was going to ask Rainier, like in the next 5 years, what
Easy to get behind. Schedule. But we'll move to item number 9.2, which is the presentation of our audited financial statements. And I'd like to welcome Darren Adamson here, our auditor. Welcome. We should have quick introductions, I think, or do you know everybody around the table? I'm not sure. Probably.
Push one more time.
Yeah.
Push your mic one more time there, Darren.
There you go. Okay, how's that?
That's
There
good.
we go. Okay, yeah, so I'm good to go if you want me to just dive right in, or?
Yeah, that sounds good, Darren, please.
Okay, perfect. So today I'm just going to present the draft. It's excerpts from the draft financial statements for the county for the year ended December 31st. You have a copy of the full set of financial statements. I'm just going to take what I think are the highlights of the statements and some of our other reports and present that to you. Of course, if there's any questions, I'll do my best to answer. So what I want to cover today is highlights of the independent auditor's report, highlights of the financial results, highlights of the notes. We have some indicators of financial condition, which are graphs that show 5 years of financial performance of the county. So I've selected some of those. The management letter, and what we call our post-audit letter, our audit findings letter. So jumping right into the auditor's report. So this year, auditor's report, it's a clean auditor's opinion. So that means we've done whatever audit work we feel is necessary in order to provide an opinion. And in our opinion, the financial statements are presented fairly in accordance with public sector accounting standards. This year, we do in our auditor's report highlight the fact that you have adopted the new Public Sector 3280 Asset Retirement Obligations section, which has been a lot of work for a lot of people, but just county staff did a great job on that, so it made our job easier. The auditor's report points out the responsibilities of various people. So management are responsible for the statements. They prepare the statements and we audit them. Council, of course, is responsible for lots of things, but one of them is overseeing management. And as auditors, we're responsible for identifying and assessing the risk of material misstatement. So we focus our time on areas that have a greater risk. We need to understand internal controls, your policies and estimates. We conclude on the going concern assumption, which is not an issue for the county. And then we evaluate the presentation of the financial statements. So we dive right into the numbers. I can't remember which page of the financial statements this is on, but basically we'll start with the revenues. So we can see 2023 column compared to the prior year and compared to the budget. Basically, I'll just kind of, for the most part, compared to the prior year. I'll hit like probably four or so highlights of the revenues and expenses and carry on that way. So overall, our revenues are up about 1.7 million. There are 3 areas that are up and one that's down significantly. So property taxes is the top line there. It's up a little over $1 million, just as we knew it would be whenever we do the bylaw and do the budget. We kind of know pretty close to exactly what the property taxes are going to come in at. It's never quite exactly the same as budget, but it's always very close. Investment income was up about $666,000. Everybody probably is pretty well aware of the interest rates recently. So, and then other revenue is up about 1.1 million, largely for the funding from the Edson and Yellowhead wildfires. Over 870,000 was for that. We also have increased costs for that as well down below. And other revenue is also up almost 200,000 for an increase in rural water deposits. The one area that's down is in special levies. Was over 2.1 million last year, and it's over 126,000 this year. So in the previous year, you had a $2 million local improvement levy for the North Head Gate that we didn't have this year, so you're not going to expect to have that year over year. So that is what I think are the highlights on the revenues. Expenses this year, 31.2 million compared to last year's 27.5, so we're up about 3.7 million in total. Some of the highlights, fire and bylaw is up just about 600,000. And again, that's largely due to responding to the wildfires. Also a bit of an increased cost of living adjustments for wages and increased repairs to the fire engine. Road, streets, and walks is up not quite 1.1 million. And that is, again, wages, traffic safety study, more repairs and maintenance this year. Those were kind of the main things. Recreation and parks is up about 485,000, and that's mostly just due to increased requisitions from the divisions. That came in at just about 1.9 million this year. And then other expenses, 400 is up about 437,000 to 991. So that's where we have our discount on taxes, and that came in at 719,000 this year, up over 110,000. And we have any tax write-offs are included in there as well, and that was about 250,000. So that's up. So overall, our expenses are up 3.7. So if we go to the next slide, our annual surplus before the undernoted, basically that would be our operating surplus for the year, 10.2 million compared to last year's 12.1. So we're down not quite 2 million, but significantly better than budget. And then we add in our other revenues, largely just capital revenues. So the big one here is government transfers, 7.6 million, and previous year was 2.6. This line here is never really going to be, it's usually not going to be comparable year over year because it depends on what capital projects we have on the go. This year we had not quite 18 million of capital asset additions, and the previous year was a little under 7 million. So, so this year of our almost 17.6 million of additions, 7.6 was funded by grants, so that means the other 10 million was funded by operations or by reserves. So when we add that in, our total excess for the years is 17.8 million. So if we go, if you're following along on the actual financial statements, you need to go back one page to the statement of financial position. So this is our balance sheet, only it doesn't balance, but it reconciles down to accumulated surplus. So a couple of the highlights here on our financial assets, we have 146 million financial assets. Our non-financial assets will come later. So what financial assets are cash or anything that will be converted into cash, basically are used up in the next year. It's not long-term stuff. So some of the highlights, cash, first one is down about 3.7 million. Basically, we've invested more into the investments, so you can see investments are up over 6.1. And some cash was invested in capital assets, as I mentioned earlier. So cash is still very, very solid at 16.7 million, so no concerns whatsoever. The other change is in trade and accounts receivable. It's up from 7.9 to about 8.9, so almost $1 million. Half of that or so is due to local improvement tax increase, and then various other, there's grants and lots of other things included in there, but that was the main thing. So overall, we're up, I guess investments were up 6.2 million. And those are recorded at cost still for the most part. We do have a new way of accounting for if we have equity investments, but we don't have any. So you'll see a new schedule this year that's all zeros because we don't have any of that. But moving down to the liabilities, we have 11 million of liabilities this year compared to 15.2 last year. The biggest decrease is in unearned revenue. So basically, unearned revenue is when we receive grants or funding in advance and we haven't spent them yet or earned it yet. We defer it as unearned and then we recognize it as revenue in future years. So previous year we had 5.3 million of unearned revenue, and this year it's down to 800,000 almost. Most of that is due to the MSI grant. So last year we had 4.2 million, and this year we've spent all that. So again, that's another reason why cash is down. Long-term debt is down 666,000. We made our regular payments. We didn't have any surprises there. Nothing new. No new debt was issued. And then our accounts payable and accrued liabilities is up about $1 million, and that is largely due to amounts owing to Brooks Bazzano for the ICF agreement and for the water project. Another $583,000 for the water project. So overall, our liabilities went from 15.2 down to 11, so we're down 4 million. And that brings us to our subtotal, our net financial assets, 135 million. That is an indicator under public sector accounting standards of our ability to pay our bills as they come due, and it's positive and it's growing. So again, no concerns whatsoever. The county is in good financial shape that way. I guess the one new line item that I didn't mention there was asset retirement obligations. So this is the brand new section that came into effect this year that required a lot of work. So I just pulled out one excerpt from the notes for here. So at the end of this year, we have 1.8 million sitting as a liability called asset retirement obligations. So the new standard came into effect this year. Your accounting team, led by Stephanie and Dustin, actually did a really good job on this, better probably than most of our other clients, or maybe even all of our other clients. So good job. So they created a white paper that shows the identification of all the different assets that have an attached ARO or asset retirement obligation. They went through the standards and laid out all the analysis and the conclusions for each area, did valuations, and in the end they chose the modified retroactive application, which basically means we restate prior year's figures as if we had recorded the liability from the first time when we bought the assets that require remediation. So we have certain assets, Tilly landfill, gravel pits, and buildings with asbestos. So when we eventually have to reclaim those or retire those assets, we'll need to do the remediation work at that time. There's also some other assets that are non-TCA related where the asset is not recorded or it's no longer in productive use. So that's the split there. So again, new standard implemented as it was supposed to be and done a really good job. Moving down on this statement of financial position to, so we had our net financial assets, 135 million. Now we add in our non-financial assets, which for the most part is tangible capital assets. This year the changes, we started at 193.5 million. We had 17.6 million of additions, and we amortized just about 8 million. So we amortize or expense the tangible capital assets over their expected useful lives. It's an estimate, but it's best we can do. The additions this year, some of the bigger ones is the County Annual Water Project. Phase 2 was just under 7 million. And then a host of other smaller items. Regional Pathways was a little over $1 million. Patricia Fire Hall was about $1 million. Various machinery and equipment, 3.8 million. And then all kinds of other smaller stuff for another 4 million or so. So once we add that in, we get to our total accumulated surplus, 341,387,000. And there's the 341,387 down at the bottom right corner of the second column. So here's another note that I've taken as an excerpt. So we did a prior period adjustment to account for the change in accounting policy to record tangible capital assets. The amount here is basically the tangible capital asset liability less the landfill and gravel pits that we had already recorded previously as liabilities, and now we've just combined them all together into one. So the amount that we had to do a retroactive restatement on was just the difference. So that turned out to be about $850,000. So what that means, our restated accumulated surplus at the beginning of the year is over $323 million. We add in our surplus at the end of the year, or for the year, and we come to $341,387,000 at the end of the year. And that's divided into three different areas. The biggest one is equity in tangible capital assets. So this is money that we've invested in our tangible capital asset pool, less any related debt. So we have equity of not quite $200 million. We separate it out largely because it's already been spent. That money, we can't spend it again, but of course we have the assets to provide services to the residents. We have another almost $14 million of unrestricted and 127 of amounts that have been set aside in specific reserves. So about 142 million of spendable surplus going forward. So again, good financial shape. One other note that I kind of wanted to highlight was just the expenses by object. So these are the same expenses that we already had a look at. They were laid out by department. 31.2 million in total. One of the bigger areas, of course, is salaries, wages, and benefits, and that is up a little bit. What are we up about? Just over $1 million, which works out to about 13%, which I think mostly it's, or 3% for cost of living adjustments. There was also increased fire salaries to respond to the wildfires, and then some temporary staffing to cover maternity leaves and just a change in staffing mix as well. So that was the biggest increase. Contracted and general services is also up 842,000 or so, largely for responding to the wildfires. Also the traffic safety study and more repairs. The other changes are not as great, but I could give you some more details, but I just want to keep it to the highlights. So that's it for the financial statements that I wanted to highlight. I also would have sent over a copy of our indicators of financial condition, and I'm not sure if you all have a copy of that or not. Yeah, you do, so great. So what I've done is I've just taken, I think, 5 that I think are kind of, I think there's 10 or so in there, and I've chosen the top 5. We can compare, when we look in there, we'll see comparables of the same type, which basically is comparables of any municipal districts or counties, and you can see there's 15, including Newell. So the first one is financial assets to liabilities. So here we have Newell is the blue line. The red line is the MD or county average in Alberta. The green line is the comparable MD average, so comparable in size, plus or minus 25% in population. And then we have the purple line is comparable population of any municipality type. So to me, the main one that you'd compare to would be comparable MD average. So typically I would compare you to the green line for the most part. So our graph here shows that our total financial assets compared to our liabilities is at about a 13-to-1 ratio, and the MD average is about a 3-to-1 ratio. So County of Newell is in good shape. We have a lot of that money earmarked in reserves, as we had a quick look at before. But so that shows, again, no concerns there. This next graph here, we're comparing the operating expenses to the taxable assessment. So we use the taxable assessment. Every year the assessor assesses the value of the properties in the county, and if it goes up or down, we kind of use that as a measure of how is the overall economy doing. This year it went up from 3.9 to, well, just under 3.9 to just over 3.9 billion. And if you look at your graph here, the blue line over the 5-year period, it's slightly going upwards, but it's pretty flat. So that means our expenses are going up a little bit on average, but not crazy. And again, we're under our comparables, so that means we're able to control our costs. There's another graph in a couple slides that will show the corresponding revenue, and we'll look at that then. This one here is just looking at our public debt charges to our revenues. So we have this year, so next year actually, we'll be paying only $238,000 towards our debt, and we have total operating revenues of 41 million this year. So about 1% of our operating revenues are going to pay off previous long-term debt. And if you look back 4 years ago, that was about 10%. So the county has paid off most of the long-term debt over the last few years. So it's almost all paid off. So we're good shape there, and that's the trend line that's going down. I can't remember, there's a couple years, 2 or 3 years left on those last loans. Here, this graph here is looking at the revenues. So kind of compare this one to the previous graph where we looked at the expenses. Again, we're comparing to the taxable assessment, and we're looking at the town's revenue sources, or own source revenues. So here we're excluding any grants that we receive or funding from federal or provincial governments. So to say, here's the revenues that the county can generate on its own. And it is also slightly increasing. So the revenues and expenses are very correlated. And so I think that's a good thing. So that means we're spending in line with what we're earning. And then the last one here, I think it's the last one, is looking at our total accumulated surplus available for future use. So I kind of mentioned this when we looked at the note on accumulated surplus. But this graph here, we're excluding the net assets that are invested in capital assets that are already spent. We're just looking at what's our spendable surplus. And again, this year, at the end of the year, it's about 142 million. Compared to 4 years ago, it's about 105 million. So we're increasing our spendable surplus over the last few years. And if you look at the breakdown, we have restricted. What's sitting in reserves was about 97 million 4 years ago, and that's up to 127 million. So most of that money has been set aside by management and council for specific purposes. And I know that the CAO has a plan on all that, and he can give more details on that if you want. So basically that's it for the numbers. We do have, each year we issue 2 letters. First one is our management letter. This year we have one recommendation, but we're putting that in on all of our municipal clients, and that's basically because we implemented the new ARO section this year. It's brand new and everyone kind of learned it for the first time. We would recommend that you kind of revisit that again next year and make sure that, talk to your peers and compare to what everyone else is doing and see if we've missed anything, or like I said, you guys did a really good analysis. So we're just putting that point in for everybody. That was it for our management letter, which is great because some of our clients, we have 6, 8, 10 sometimes recommendations. So great job. Thanks to Stephanie and her team for all her help making our job easier during doing the audit. And then we have our post-audit letter, which is kind of our audit findings letter. There are quite a few things that we are required to communicate to council if we find them. So we didn't find any illegal acts or fraud, nor did we have any reasons to suspect any. We didn't have any disagreements with management or major difficulties doing the audit. I mean, there was extra work for ARO implementation, but that's, again, we had great cooperation, and county was well prepared. Our post-audit letter does also point out some emerging issues, so some changes that are coming in future years to the accounting standards. There are 4 that we've kind of noted. The first one is on purchased intangibles. So previously we couldn't record purchased intangible assets as an asset. So for example, cultural or artwork, that kind of thing. It's not really going to make a difference to the county. So it's a new standard, but it's really not going to affect us. The next one is on revenue recognition, and the standard is changing, but I'd say we're already pretty well following how the new standard is going to look anyways. So there might be the odd area where we recognize a revenue in a little bit different format than we have in the past, but again, it's not going to materially affect the county. There's also a new standard on public-private partnerships and how to account for those. And those will all come into effect next year. And then in 3 years' time, we'll have a whole new look on the financial statement presentation. Well, presumably it'll be in 3 years. They've already postponed it one time. So who knows? But the biggest change will be in the statement of financial position, where right now we have our financial assets minus our liabilities, come to a subtotal, then we add in our non-financial assets, and we just reconcile down to accumulated surplus. The idea now is to go back to more of a balance sheet presentation with all our assets at the top, balanced with the liabilities and equity or surplus at the bottom, I think is what most people are more familiar with if you have your own businesses or other nonprofit organizations. So that's coming presumably in 2027. And that is what I had for highlights. Anybody has any questions? I'll do my best.
Thanks, Darren. Appreciate that. Are there any questions? Holly, please.
The asset retirement obligations, is that just for municipal, or how broad was that ruling?
Yeah, so that is a public sector accounting standards, the new standard. So anybody who follows public sector accounting standards, so that would include all governments, all 3 levels of government, plus anybody who's controlled. So for example, the public school divisions in Alberta are controlled by the province, so they would follow the same standards.
Go ahead, Holly.
Do you consider it a helpful process, or is it just something to make more work?
Yeah.
I think I have the answer.
Okay. Any other questions? Kelly, go ahead, please. Yeah.
If I could just make a comment, thank you, Darren, for all the work that you do, and congratulations, Stephanie and staff, and thank you for all the hard work that you put into working with Darren. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think that's worthy of
Yep. Okay, thank you. If there are no more comments or questions, I will look for a motion to accept the audited financial statements for the year ending December 31st, 2023. Lynette, please.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. All in favor, please indicate. That's carried. Thank you. And I'd like to thank you, Darren, for your work, and Stephanie for the good work you do for us and makes this day easier, as Darren indicated, and we appreciate that. And for our management team, Matt, it's credit to all of us, and we appreciate that very much. Thank you.
You're welcome very much, and thank you. So now I guess what will happen is I'll go back, I'll sign off the file because now it's been formally approved. We'll get the documents sent electronically for signature, and then once that happens, then we can get them finalized and up to municipal affairs. We're usually before the deadline, so we're in good shape. So again, thank you very much.
Thanks for coming in today. Appreciate that. We're making up some good time. We're a few minutes past our scheduled 11:30 timeline for a public hearing, but we will move to a public hearing now. If I get a motion to direct us in that direction, please, Amanda.
I'll make that motion.
Can we move to a public hearing? All in favor, please indicate. That's carried. And we have a couple of bylaws to consider, and with that I will welcome Maria back to the meeting, and if you'll take us through this.
Thank you. This bylaw 206724 is for a land use amendment to change the outlined area on Schedule A from Agriculture General District to Rural Residential District. The subject property is in Division 8, 10 kilometers north of the city of Brooks. MPC has approved an application for subdivision at the March 28th meeting with the condition that the land use amendment be completed to allow for the second parcel out of the quarter section prior to the finalization of the subdivision. The residential rural district of the land use bylaw is to provide for acreage residential or clustered development on parcels that can support private water and sewer systems in agricultural areas. This was circulated to required referrals and adjacent landowners. There were no comments received from adjacent landowners, and Alberta Transportation and Alberta Health Services both responded similarly to what they did at the subdivision application stage. So the recommendation is that once the public hearing is closed and should no objections be heard, that council consider giving second and third reading to the bylaw. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Maria. Are there any questions in the public sphere with regard to this? Nothing online? And we don't have any questions in the gallery? So I think we're good. Thanks, Maria. We can move on.
The next one is Bylaw 2068-24, which is for the road closure and lease for road allowances adjacent to the northwest of 4, 2013. The subject lands are in Division 3, southwest of the hamlet of Patricia. All of the adjacent parcels are in the Ag General Land Use District. The applicant, has installed a pivot that encroaches onto the road allowance. Approval to proceed was given by council on March 14th. This was circulated to adjacent landowners and required referrals. There were no issues heard by any of the adjacent landowners. Torxon Oil and Gas did have a few questions regarding access should the road allowance be closed. And there are provisions in the lease agreement to allow them continued access to their sites. And they were okay with that. They were happy with that. So they did not have any objections. It is recommended by staff that should no objections be heard at the public hearing, that council give second and third reading. That council give first reading to this, and then it will be sent to Alberta Transportation. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Maria. Are there, seeing no one in the gallery to respond to this or ask or make any comments? Are there any, Catherine, in the public sphere? Seeing none. I think we can, Neil, do you have a motion to move out of public hearing, or you?
One question for Maria. Are we ready to put down some kind of lease numbers on these encroachments?
That's maybe outside of the sphere of the public hearing, but it's a quick conversation we can maybe have at another time. Neil, are you good with that?
Yeah, I just wondered if it
Yeah.
impacted how we dealt with this, but I'm in favor of it.
Yeah. Okay, Adina, please.
I make a motion, we move out of public hearing.
Okay, all in favor of that, please indicate. That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Maria. We are on to item number 8, bylaws, which is bylaw 8.1, which is 8.1.1 would be a motion for second reading for the bylaw that we just considered in the public hearing. Is there anyone prepared to make a motion to that effect? Holly, please.
I'll make a motion for second reading.
Okay, any questions, comments? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please indicate. That's carried. 8.1.2 would be a motion for third reading. Neil, please.
I will make that motion.
Thank you. All in favor of the motion, please indicate. It is also carried. And now we need a motion on 8.2, which is a motion to consider first reading for bylaw 2068-24 for the road closure. Anyone prepared to make a motion to first reading? Amanda, please.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. All in favor, please indicate. That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Maria. We could pick up at 10.3. Yeah, thanks. Let's move down to 10.3, which is the proclamation, request for proclamation of Mental Health Week. Ariana, do you want to give some comments or information for us with regard to that?
I'm not sure what else to add about that. We've got 2 proclamation requests from Grasslands Regional FCSS. So the first is Mental Health Week. The RFD, I looked back in the minutes, and I think we've only proclaimed this once in the past, but it's up to you.
It has always been as per request, or?
Yes.
Okay, you've been requested to do that. Kelly, please.
I just wanted to clarify why this may or may not have come up before. The question has always been, if we're proclaiming something, what are we doing about it? Just to make the proclamation and not do anything about it. So my question is to Grasslands, and we have 2 reps here on council that can maybe answer this question. What are we doing for Mental Health Week, and is this a recommendation that you also support? Because just to proclaim it is not enough. We need to do something about it if we're, right? It's an action.
Okay, thank you. Holly, please.
Well, FCSS is spending a fair bit of money on Mental Health Week. A couple events are going to be planned. So I think that the county may not be actually doing anything through the sponsorship or the money given to FCSS. We are promoting this week, and I think it actually it works in nicely with what we're doing. So I would like to make a motion that we proclaim it Seniors Week as requested.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions or comments? All in favor of the motion, please indicate. Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Item number 10.4, which is the request for a proclamation for Alberta Seniors Week being June the 3rd to the 9th. Any further information on that, Ariana, or is that as per presentation there?
Yeah, I'm not sure what else to add on that one. Seniors Week we have proclaimed pretty much annually for several decades.
Great. Kelly, go ahead, please.
I would make a motion that we continue this activity, and I know there are activities going on within the communities for this, so motion to approve.
Okay, thank you. All in favor of that motion, please indicate. Every day is Seniors Day, I think, but anyway. That's excellent, thank you. Let's move on to item number 10.5, or, okay, yeah. Requests for functions of council. Are there any? Anyone have any? Holly, go ahead.
It's just a clarification more so. I know Martin Shields has a Zoom, I believe, coming up. Am I correct in that the person who's speaking on behalf of the county, that would be you, Arno, or designate, that is a function of council, and the rest of us just join in if we're interested? Is that correct? It's not a function of council, though. Do I have that correct?
I think so. I don't know that it's ever been a function of council, but I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know. Kelly, go ahead.
I'm nodding in agreement. Also, it's a political affiliation, so that's typically right. Also, I was on Zoom meetings with the ministers over the last week on drought, and so unless I applied ahead, I wouldn't count those as in, right? So it's just great to have the conversation always, but we typically only when somebody is speaking.
Okay, thank you. Any, Lynette, please.
Just to add to that, when I was on one of those calls with Martin Shields, and he was asking people to speak, like, so whether I was totally not prepared to say anything, but I was the only County of Newell rep that was on that call that day, so it would be nice if we had that organized as to who was going to do what.
Right. Okay, that's good. Okay, let's move on. I see nothing, no indications for functions of council. Item number 10.6 6. Stephanie, please, for the approval of the 2024 final budget. Go ahead, Stephanie, please.
Hello. I'm here today looking to have the 2024 final budget be approved by Council as presented. Council previously approved the 2024 interim budget on November 23rd. Since then, we've made some changes based on information that has come about over the last couple of months. The changes included in the final budget are primarily related to tax revenues based on actual assessments and requisition amounts, grant revenues updated for qualifying projects, updates to the seniors, school, and designated industrial property requisition amounts, incorporating additional spending approved by Council since the beginning of the year, and carry forward projects approved in the 2023 budget which were not started or fully completed in 2023. The final budget highlights include an increase in property taxes of $729,000 or 2.26% compared to 2023 budget. An increase in operating expenses of $2.05 million or 6.17% compared to the 2023 budget. And the main drivers of this increase are increase in staffing costs, inclusive of merit and cost of living increases, and the additional of a couple new positions, such as the projects assistant and engineering technologist. Increase in transfers to other organizations under the ICF and other agreements, and an increase in the police model costs. It should be noted that support for new projects requested by the City of Brooks, specifically for the old rodeo grounds and skateboard park redevelopments, have not been included in the final budget. Also, support for the new projects requested by the town of Bazzano, specifically the Bazzano Airport lot development and the outdoor sound garden and amphitheater, have not been included in the final budget. There has been an increase in the estimated amortization expense, as well as capital spending of $2.5 million, debt repayments of $106,000, and we are looking to increase our debt by $750,000 in support of the new Lake Newell Resort Community Pathway, which will be repaid by local improvement tax from benefiting properties. And then that ends up with a net transfer of $386,000 to restricted surplus.
Okay, thank you for that presentation. Are there any questions or comments? Matt, you have...
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, if council recalls, going into interim budget, administration was targeting a 3% revenue increase on property taxes, and at the time we kind of put the caveat that we're only reaching for that if we have the growth in assessment to support it. Shannon's going to follow Stephanie here shortly. Growth in assessment was not sufficient for us to achieve that 3%. You'll see we're around a 2.26% increase. So in dollar terms, that means we're $239,708 under what we had projected in interim. We did have some growth in residential, growth in non-residential. So we've captured that growth. You'll also see when Shannon's up here, there was inflationary pressures on residential, so we've reduced your residential tax rate to only capture, it's about 72,000 additional residential tax dollars there. So just wanted to point that out so council is clear. Administration is comfortable with that growth. We ended 2023 with a bigger surplus than we had initially projected. So we've got some growth to hopefully address these inflationary pressures that have chased us up till now and hopefully will settle themselves out over the next few years. But just wanted to highlight that for council.
Thanks for that explanation, Matt. Questions first, Holly, and then Neil.
Under Appendix D, I was just curious, we have water that's increased 112,000 from the initial budget, and fire that's down. I was just curious what the reasons were for those two.
Matt, please. Yeah.
Yeah, water is largely related to, we've increased the budget for the water purchases from NRSC. That's gone up, and it should go up because we're adding additional services, so we caught that one in final. Fire, I would have to dig into and get back to you.
Okay, thank you. Neil, you had a question?
Yeah, I do. Where is this $729,000 going to come from? Is it spread evenly across the tax pool, or like my question last year, which I'm going to ask when you get up here, as far as the acreage owners go, is it going to make 2.26% difference, or you know where I'm getting at on this?
Okay, Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, so I will just start by saying you will never see the tax burden evenly distributed across all categories. So even within the residential category, which we limited to just the growth, depending what type of property you live in, what area of the county you live in, your assessment is going to change differently. So we try our best to keep it static. On residential, you'll see we've dropped the tax rate. On non-res, you'll see we've taken a small bit off of the non-residential tax rate. The only rate that increases would be farmland going up to match your non-res. What that means for the farm parcel with the largest assessment is about a $50 increase in their tax bill for next year. So we've been, and the numbers prove it, you've seen it today. The county is very disciplined when it comes to the operating expense compared to the assessment available. I think councils for a long number of years deserve the credit for building a very financially sustainable county at below average tax rates when you compare us to our peers across the province.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Any other questions? Kelly?
Not a question. I was just willing to give you a motion if you were ready for it.
Okay, I think there's a couple other questions, but thank you. Go ahead, Holly.
In the capital expenditures, under 42 wastewater, we have the pump lift and transfer maintenance from Lake Newell Resort at $450,000. And I just couldn't remember how that works. I know when we've done huge sewage rebuilds, such as in Scandia and Tilly, they have a tax extra put on that, but when we're only doing repairs, is it not?
Matt, please, thanks.
Yeah, so great question. With both Lake Newell Resort as well as Tilly Lagoon desludge, we have applied for grant funding. If we get the grant funding approved, it'll be grant funded. If it is not approved, it will be funded from restricted surplus.
Okay, thank you. Are there other questions? Neil, did you have another question? Go ahead.
Yeah, the two big ones that aren't in there, where would the tax rate be if we did the old rodeo grounds, part of the skateboard park, or whatever you want to do, and took care of Bazzano? That's going to throw another 2, 3, 4% on there, isn't it? Or is that how that works?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's an it depends answer, right? So if you wanted to go to your ratepayers in the current year and say you're on the hook for this increase, I can't tell you off the top of my head what that means in terms of the tax rates. Would you just put it on residential because they're the ones who benefit? Would you split it? So the answer is it depends. Or would you fund it from your rec fund, which has a limited amount of funding? It's around $5 million that is available today.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Neil, or you've got another question?
Yeah, thanks for that. Like those are pretty substantial numbers, and we're going to have to deal with them sooner or later, one way or the other. Probably will fund them, I would imagine. But doesn't that kind of distort what the real tax rate is?
We're not funding them in this budget.
No, we're not funding them in this budget. But that could leave you with a 7% increase next year.
Right. Isn't that always our issue? Like, it depends
I don't know
on what we approve as to take into our budget in the future. So,
I'm just trying to get rid of a great
Matt
big
and
one
then
next year.
Kelly, yeah. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, so just for perspective on the recreation piece for the county, we allocate $500,000 of our tax rate, so 0.5 towards recreation. You also allocate 0.5 towards your paving fund. What that means in dollar terms, projected for next year, is $2,143,000. On the recreation conversation, from that 2.1 million, we subtract our operating. So we've got all these deals with ag societies, with the villages, the towns, the city. We subtract that, and what's left is what we sock into our recreation fund, and I think we're around 589,000 going into that for this year. You've got 5 million in your fund. You've got a number of requests. You could fund it from the rec fund. You don't necessarily have to just tack that on to next year's tax rate. And from administration's point of view, we would say keep it at that $500,000 that is being allocated to the rec fund, and that's the room you have. If council wanted to change philosophy and look at going above the provincial average for tax rates, we could look at that. If there's these really important projects that need to get funded, but I think in terms of the partnerships we have that support recreation, I have heard from my peers that we need to dial it back. So when I speak to some of our neighbors who are in negotiations with their urbans, they say, you're maybe you're sending too much. Well, maybe we are, but we try to have it anchored in data. So if we don't have the usage statistics, we use the proxy of population, which isn't perfect, but it's close. And the county's in a position with the assessed values that we have that we can do it, and we can achieve it at below average tax rate. So it's good for our neighbors, it's good for our citizens, and until one of the components of those equations change, you're able to do it.
Okay, thanks for that, Matt. Kelly, please.
I want to recognize that this budget, as presented, is as discussed, and I would like to make a motion to approve as presented.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? All in favor of the motion, please indicate. Opposed? Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Stephanie, for your good work. Let's move to item number, it's 12 o'clock, but we can just, let's take first reading for our tax rates. Shannon Viette, welcome. Number 11.1, bylaw 2072-4, the tax rates, first reading. Please go ahead.
Thanks. So service and capital projects included in the final budget will be funded through the tax rates, as discussed already. Tax assessment values increased by $167 million from last year. The increase consists of $132 million in growth and $35 million in inflation, as detailed in the package. Inflation is driven by changes in the market values and changes to cost modifiers, which are set by municipal affairs. The county expects to raise $32.9 million in municipal taxes before writing off around $23,000, or half of the provincial grants in lieu of taxes. I am requesting first reading on this, please.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for Shannon? Seeing none, is there a motion to provide, to accept first reading? Lynette, please.
I'll make the motion for first reading of the tax rates, bylaw 2072-24.
Thank you. All in favor, please indicate. That's carried. Thank you. Thank you. It being just a little bit after 12 o'clock, I'm going to suggest we break for lunch and reconvene 1 o'clock. We do have an appointment with Sergeant Searle of the RCMP at 1 o'clock, and they have requested that be in camera, so we'll go in camera at 1 o'clock to meet with RCMP. So we'll break for lunch. Thank you. You have missing it. Adina. Adina, where's she? Let's, pardon me? Did she? Oh. Somebody should call, like I said it was gonna. Okay, yes. Now let's call this meeting back to order and we'll move to pick up item number 9.1.1, the motion that considers the funding request from Castle's Community Center. Are there any comments or questions, or someone have direction with regard to that? We had a couple of options. Anybody, Kelly?
Yeah, I would like to reiterate the comment that I made, that I feel this is a new build. And so I would like to approve this application based on a new build concept in our policy, which I believe, as I recall, is a 75-25 split. 75 for the Castles Hall organization and 25 for the County of Newell. That's my motion.
Thank you. That was one of the options. Any further discussion or ready for the question? Neil?
I think that's a reasonable split on this one.
Okay, all in favor of the motion, please indicate. That's carried. Thank you. Now let's move down to item number 12.
Let's get to 8.3.
Sorry, 8.3, that's the one I was missing, yeah. Bylaw 2074-24, Community Standards. Mark, are you taking that?
Good afternoon, Council. Today, here to present Community Standards Bylaw. This is a consolidation of 3 other bylaws that the county had, so applying some lean principles and consolidating. With that, I'd like to identify that not a lot has changed from the 3 bylaws that were previously in existence, just consolidating them into one for better management. It also provides better reference for the public rather than having to search in 3 different places to find information. If there are any questions with the bylaw, I'm do my best to answer. If not, I will direct to Randy. He'll have more specific answers for you, but otherwise we're here to ask for first reading of the bylaw.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Holly, please.
In number 7, noise control exceptions, in terms of agricultural, does that also mean exclusion from 10-7 and 10-9? Oh, sorry, exclusion from the time zones, that's what I was trying to write. So it's quiet zone from 10 to 7 during the weekday, or set 10 to 9 on the weekends. So when it talks about noise control exceptions, I'm wondering, is farming always excluded from any noise conditions?
Yes, farming is always excluded from that.
All right.
Okay, thank you. Kelly?
Okay, my comments and questions are around the cannabis bylaw. I was at the table when that one came into play and was approved. But if you look at the wording, it's unenforceable. It says that nobody can consume anywhere in the county of Newell, period. I think that needs to be edited because as we know, cannabis is approved by the province and it is a legal drug or a legal use. Take that drug out. And then the other point that I would like to ask about is the definition. We have vaping in there as a definition. And nowhere in the bylaw, in the new bylaw, do we refer to vaping. So why are we putting it in if we're, I mean, we don't need a definition if we're not enforcing vaping.
Okay, so vape is referred to in 9(1)A. No person shall smoke, vape, or consume cannabis in any public place within the county. And so to answer the first question, the reason why the cannabis is included in here is the province does have the provincial legislation on it. However, when we presented the bylaw to council, it was a matter of, can you smoke cannabis or vape outside of places such as the CRA, which is located inside the county of Newell? It is not within the city of Brooks. Can you and do you want those behaviors taking place outside of the CRA? Are there other public places like your campgrounds that you want cannabis consumption, vaping and smoking and things happening or not? When you're in your site, if I have it right, when you're in your campsite, you have that space to yourself. But once you migrate to the camp kitchen, the playground, or public places, you are now in the public place where it can be dealt with by an officer by bylaw. Provincial legislation does not have any reference to not doing that in public places, so that's why we built it into the bylaw. And that was in there previously.
Okay, thank you for that. And thanks for pointing out 9. So could we, by definition, not by definition, but in wording, rather than use the wording anywhere in the county of Newell, could it be outside a public facility?
You can in the county of Newell with the exception of public places.
Oh, that is stated in there.
Yes,
okay.
yep, under 9(1)A. And sorry, got to do the flipping back and forth because I don't know these things off the top of my head myself. A public place means a premise that a member of the public has direct or indirect access and includes private property to which a member of the public has direct or indirect authorization to access.
And 9.
And I believe that through the courts and stuff, this language has already been proven and upheld as it needs to be. So our recommendation would be able to keep it in there if council is so supportive. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Neil?
I've got it. I think we're hitting the vaping and the cannabis a little hard. Are there similar rules for booze? Like if there's 2 picnic tables on a public beach and somebody's enjoying a bottle of wine and the guy over here wants a joint, one of them's going to get a ticket and the other one isn't?
I know historically the beaches, whether you're in a provincial park or otherwise, they are public places and alcohol consumption on public beaches and whatnot is not permitted. So that's already taken care of. The example that was given to me with possession and such is you could have a whole flatbed truck full of alcohol. There's no limitation on how much alcohol you can possess at one time, but there is provincial legislation as to how much cannabis you can have on a person at a time. And that our officers have had to deal with in the past because that is provincial legislation. So slight difference in quantity that you may have on yourself. As for the consumption, the alcohol is already dealt with on public beaches and stuff. So we're falling in line with the bylaw.
And what's the reason for the vaping in there?
I think that's just where we went with council previously, and you know, there's designated smoking areas where you can do your vaping and whatever, but just out in the general public place has been what council has supported not having or not permitting. Well, I guess it would be up to the 10 of you to
Mark, just for clarification, there's nothing that's changed in this. You're just putting these together, right?
No, that's correct. The only thing that I can really say that may have changed in this is under number 8, the public behavior, public places, no person shall use blasphemous, abusive, grossly insulting language or sing or shout in a boisterous manner. That language was found in another municipal bylaw that has been upheld in the courts, so we just thought that that one would help this out in the place that somebody filed a complaint on that kind of activity. Otherwise, it's as per the 3 bylaws.
Okay. Lynette, please.
My question is about the daytime. Why is there differentiation between weekday and weekend? Like, why? Lots of people work shift work and whatnot, so I don't understand why.
Yeah, acknowledging that this is how it's been for Newell in the past. I know there are communities, and I can't say for certain because I can't recall off the top of my head, but I believe the city of Brook says that any activity at any time of day that causes disruption to the neighbor can be enforceable. So they don't deal with the times. Historically, the times have always been there that generally on the weekends, the majority of the public are there to rest. Weekdays are the typical business days and weekends are time of rest. So that's where the greater time period exists. It'd be up to council providing direction for second or third reading for additional changes, I guess. But
okay, Neil?
Yeah, just a question for the officers there. Some of these seem to be almost unenforceable. Like, how much of this stuff do you actually deal with in a year?
Sure. The big one, well, last year before, it was actually more cannabis, to be honest, that we were dealing with, in specifically people having it in their vehicle within reach. And so that's where we would deal some with the cannabis and deal with it that way. Not so much the smoking in a public place. That's been pretty good, but it was more with associated with vehicles. So cannabis is probably our main one out of it. For cannabis, I think that the biggest year we had, I would say, was maybe 3 to 4. A lot of it was education. We would tell them, like, to dump it, right, or we'd seize it, right? So, yeah, but I'd say around 3 or 4.
No, that's cool. That's what I meant, but unenforceable puts you guys in a position where you're pacifying. You're not writing the ticket.
No, that's right. This gives us the authority at least to educate and say, hey, do you know you could have received a ticket on this, and that way we can take some action and that covers us. But you're right, it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to issue a ticket on it.
Well, you haven't issued very many.
No, that's right. We're more
cool.
of the education. Yeah, exactly.
Great.
Kelly?
I'm ready to make the motion. I'm satisfied with my questions, so motion for first reading.
Okay. Any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor, please indicate. That's carried. Thank you. Thank you.
If we can get all the way through it.
Okay, yeah, that's right. We need second reading too. Is there a motion? Adina, please.
I'll make a motion for second reading on the bylaw.
Okay, all in favor, please indicate. And to do third reading, we need consent. Ellen, motion for consent for third reading. All in favor, please indicate. That's carried. And now a motion for third reading of bylaw of 2074-24. Holly, please. All in favor of the motion, please indicate. That is carried. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah. And we will go to the municipal services business. Mark, please.
Okay, just so quickly giving you the highlight side of things. Officers have been a little bit busy this past period. 18 warnings, 33 tickets, conducted 20 investigations over the past month. Ice fishing obviously closed, so helping the EID with assistance on ice shacks and stuff left on their property. Our CMP AFRAX radio talk group continues to be worked on for our officers. Continue to go with the regular meetings and keep that collaboration going. We also hosted a cargo securement course, of which 40 vehicles were checked. Only one load was properly secured out of those 40 vehicles, so telling you what's going on within our area. And I'd just like to remind council that we do not have highway patrol services or anything anymore that do traffic weights and load securement and stuff in our region. So that's where you're seeing things go awry a little bit with one day of doing this course and stopping those vehicles and seeing what's not right. So additionally, operations, as you know, spring appears to have sprung. Not a whole lot of frost in the ground. Roads are getting soft. We've received moisture as of last week. We're trying to get roads graded. We're trying to tend to potholes, washboard, and everything else of degraded road surfaces. We can't grade mud. Please be patient with us. Our guys are grading where they can. Some roads are dusty, some are muddy. They will get around, they will tend to things, asking the public that they drive with some caution for changing road conditions, and contact our office when they want to for customer service requests, and we'll get things in a queue and get them tended to. Reminding council, it takes us 20 working days to make a cycle. So in a month, we might get our roads up to snuff, but we're still in thaw season. So that probably isn't likely. We are trying to run additional hours, 10 hours per grader operator, to get around things a little more efficiently and keep road conditions at a manageable state. Truck drivers, they've been doing what they've been doing and getting stockpile program handled, so we're a little bit beyond that 79% now. Maintenance operators working to keep up with things. Again, the Bobcat has been working as an excellent machine for the pathway maintenance and stuff. When we have received snow, it's way more efficient. It's time savings, works really well. Street sweeping, pending weather, first week of May. Social media, that's where to watch if you want to know when things are happening. We will get those out. Dust abatement program has been advertised as of March 25th. Last day in April, Tuesday the 30th, is the last day for application period. So 4:30, that just keeps us lean in our process of getting everything processed on the map and getting our crews ready to go in the June period. What else we got? Rural water, you can read up on that. We're making huge progress on that. You guys just awarded contract last meeting and stuff for the contract 4. So those things are all progressing. Gravel exploration, we should have something coming to you soon. Rural road study, final draft copies there as well. That's going to help inform us with final budget and what our priorities are for council. So when we bring this to you, we will be identifying what our 2024 program looks like and then building into budget moving forward. Fisher Bridge, that structure was damaged on February 26th by an overdimensional load. Department's been working with Alberta Transportation, Volker Steven and stuff. Volker Steven will be the one that does the repairs. It's a matter of getting the components to be able to piece that thing back together so that we can take the weight restriction off of it. So right now it is under weight restriction. High loads, heavy loads, those sorts of things all need to go around and find alternative routes, which would be Range Road 18-2. Service there will be restored as soon as possible, and we do have our message board sign out there saying that the bridge is currently restricted. Kinbrook Pathway contractors installed the bridge Tuesday, March 19th, so the pedestrian bridge that spans 100 feet would have been in the local newspaper this past period. It spans 100 feet, and it's quite the span across that canal, so they'll be working on the rest of the path as time permits. Lake Newell Resort Pathway, we're progressing to the stage of engaging landowners and whatnot. We're looking at getting the drill out there to do soil sampling and understand what structure we need to have to build that pathway. And we still continue with our research and working with our partners on the drought plan. Otherwise, I'll take any questions since we're on a timeline here with yourselves and other appointments. So if there are any questions, I'll gladly answer.
Thank you, Mark. Are there questions for Mark? Holly, please.
With the looking for a new grader operator, I believe when we contracted out, the idea was to see what was more financially viable. So is your assessment that it's better to have an in-house grader as opposed to contracting one out?
It is better to have in-house graders. We have the right to direct them as we need to and whatnot. We've after finally a year of exposure and experience, they know where they're going and what they're doing, but having that service in-house allows us to direct them. Otherwise, we can have them included on the brush control and tree maintenance programs and stuff. Otherwise, that contractor is there for grading and snow plowing services. So support in other areas always helps. We have a candidate. Sounds like an offer is going out here soon. We will see how that response has been. This is about candidate number 7 on the list because others have moved on to other opportunities before we've been able to get signatures and confirm things. So it's been a challenge, and that's the one area that I have concern about is the skill behind skilled labor, particularly in the grader component. I'm not that fearful in truck driving and stuff or other areas of my area of responsibility, but grading is really where the county shines and takes its pride, because if commodities can't make it to market, it's because of our roads. So that's what we focus on.
Thank you, Mark. Any other questions? Holly?
I know you're waiting on parts, but what is your best guess on Fisher Bridge is rough?
We had management team meeting this week, and Jeff made it sound like it should be within the next 2 weeks. Sorry, it's just the way it is. Like when somebody takes an overdimensional load and tries to cross a bridge that clearly indicates don't go across it, this is what we're left with. You're dealing with a 100-year-old structure, and to make components fit is not something you just ordinarily find on a shelf these days. So,
okay, Kelly, please.
Thank you for the update on Fisher Bridge, and I'm sure ratepayers will be happy to hear that that road will be back in play very soon. I would like to talk a bit about 18-2 going south from Highway 1. I've had, as you know, lots of calls from the neighborhood. They're not opposed to industry going south there. I've heard that strong and loud. What they are requesting is attention to the roads. So 18-2 has taken all the traffic now, of course, and then it splits off at the top of the hill and goes towards the dam from there, or it continues on south. And right now it's flat, it's wide, there's no ditch. The gravel, when there is gravel on the road, it's falling off to the side in most places. And then we're into dust season. So do we have conversation with industry so that we can get some relief and a plan going forward during this influx of traffic going south?
Yeah, the manager of operations has been talking to industry about that. It's kind of the same thing with all roads, is they're all softening. Dust is on some, mud are on others. To get them out with water trucks right now with softening roads, I don't know that would be a benefit at this time, but later on when things firm up, probably help a lot. Dust abatement is middle of June, hopefully completed by the 1st of July, right? No, we'll turn the focus to that and see what else we can do out there, Councillor Crispin. That's really the best we can commit to at this time.
Much appreciated, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mark. And I would entertain a motion to accept the Municipal Services Director's report. Amanda?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. All in favor, please indicate. That is carried. Thanks, Mark. I think that brings us close to the end of our agenda, unless there's any comments on information items. But with that, I will entertain a motion to go in camera, and we will meet with our RCMP representatives. You're welcome. Go ahead.
I make a motion to go in camera.
Okay, all in favor that we move in camera, please indicate. That is carried. Thank you.